Everyone, all 12 of us, and more to come. Thank you very much for joining us for this third day of the HIAC Spring Meeting. We appreciate your patience with us. We had an event happen yesterday, which forced us to cancel the program. But we're here bigger and better than ever before. Today, we're talking about artificial intelligence. A couple just sort of ground rules, maybe. Please ask your questions in the chat room. That's where we will be monitoring that and bringing those questions forward. And we will be muting everybody. We are recording this session, and it will be available once we get it all squared away. So with that, I'm going to start with by introducing a good friend and neighbor of mine, Kevin Reick, from IBM. Kevin is a distinguished engineer at IBM, and he leads the team responsible for post-silicon validation of power processors. And I'm sure he'll be glad to tell us all about that, because I know nothing about it, quite honestly. But I'm looking forward to learning all about it. Kevin has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Rutgers University and a master's in computer engineering from Syracuse University. He holds 64 patents in the areas of post-silicon validation, RAS, and processor design. But maybe one of the most interesting things about him is a pilot. Of some note, I think. We fly around and go have lunch in remote places from time to time. He's also the crew chief on a B-25, on the Mitchell B-25, which is a very exciting airplane ride if you ever get a chance. He is, like I said, is a good neighbor, a good friend, and I think a valuable resource to the center. So with that, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bill.
Full speed ahead.
All right, let me get this thing going. All right. Hey, Bill, can you see that?
Yeah, sure can.
Perfect.
We're good.
Okay, you all heard about myself. I want to put a shout out for my friend Mike Hollinger, who co-produced this presentation. He's a distinguished engineer in the AI applications group here at IBM, and he would love to have been here, but he's a proud dad. Baby arrived on Sunday, and so I told him I would cover this presentation for him. He did offer to come up to College Station if we want to have more in-face discussions with him later on, once he's got the baby all settled in. And hopefully I can answer the questions. If not, we can always direct it to him. He'll gladly respond. So let me take you through some of the presentation. So imagine your favorite project that you've worked on, and we'll move forward here in a minute. The team works well together. Everyone knows what they're doing, what the problem is, what is the intent of the project. What I'm going to share with you is a set of tools and tricks to understand how to leverage AI systems and have a chance at emulating the same experience. So I'm going to take you through why now, what's happening in the industry and why is it happening at this point in time in history? And what does it really take to apply AI into a real project context? And then towards the tail end, we'll get into some of the tools that IBM has offered and a lot of these are free tools, to leverage your existing data and to get started in an AI project. So what I like to do is first time I saw this exercise, this is pretty interesting. Michael took me through this the first time. And he says, okay, think about this. What does a bicycle look like? And you'll get some usual answers. And people start to list out all the different parts of the bicycles and the features, and they'll bring up the seat, the frame, the tires, pedals, and it doesn't really answer the question. It says, these features don't describe what a bicycle looks like really at all in its entirety. He shows some examples. This particular one, this is pretty much what the picture I just showed. This is what the classical, what you would all know is a bicycle. But then look at some other examples. Okay, what is this? Think about it. Oh, your minds, you look at this and you say, oh, yeah, that's definitely a bicycle. It's sitting on its side. But think of the challenges of an AI machine that's trying to understand it. Look at that. You know it's a bicycle. You don't see all the parts, right? All right, get into the next one. Okay, we all look at this. It's a handlebars. You see part of the wheel. We all know that it is a bicycle, but keep in mind, it's a bicycle, yet very little information is actually coming through. All those other pieces and parts, they're not actually there, but it's a bicycle. And I love this. So you see this little guy here. He was, this picture was taken down at South by Southwest, riding his little skateboard. And all your attention is probably drawn to that, but look at the upper part. There they are, they're bicycles. And again, only part of the information is there. The human mind, we can see that, and we know it's a bicycle. So it's really a good example of it's a perfect cast on we have AI models for this, and in fact, there's tools online, Google search and all that, where you can actually look for give it part of a picture, and AI modeling takes place, and it can find all those different images that match what we would call a bicycle. So now I'm going to get into why now. There's a lot of things happening in the industry that has allowed us to start to see more advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And actually, it's interesting because Bill and I had talked about this, and I just want to point out a little thing called Moore's Law. Moore's Law was defined by Gordon Moore. He worked for Intel, and it was back in 1965. And what he was noticing even back then, that the number of transistors going into integrated circuits was doubling about every 2 years. And to give you an idea of a little bit of history, this is an IBM presentation, so I'm going to share with you IBM technology. And you can see from 1990, what we call the Power 1, all the way up to Power 10, all the way on the right side. And we have been experiencing pretty much that same growth with Moore's Law. If you look there in the cloud space, Power 4 at 170 million transistors per chip, per die, up to Power 10, which is running around 18 billion transistors. Power 10 is the systems that IBM has just started shipping. And around the Power 8 time frame, around 14 to 15, we started to introduce GPUs. In particular, for IBM, we were using the NVIDIA GPUs as offload engines for AI processing. And I want to give you an example of that. This is a picture of the IBM supercomputer called Summit. Summit is the latest supercomputer that I've worked on, and there's one at Oak Ridge and one at Lawrence Livermore. This particular one was used early on in the fight against COVID. It did a lot of analysis about the coronavirus itself. And the node in this thing is actually constructed from Power 9 processors married up with NVIDIA GPUs in a very dense form factor. And there's hundreds of these nodes in this computer that you see on the side. And it's at the time, it was the #1 supercomputer in the world. Of course, that, again, almost like Moore's Law, there's new generations coming out every time. This is the 4th supercomputer I personally have worked on, the fastest so far, but they've always been transitioning and getting faster every time. Now, I want to show you a little presentation. This is a video where we took exactly the same technology and we applied it to an AI situation at Canadian Railroad. Let's run this.
Canadian National Railway, or CN as we know it, is one of the top 6 railroads in North America. It runs a rail-centric supply chain network of over 20,000 miles of track. It's the only railroad in North America covering this size of territory. Success in rail and in supply chain operations depends on your network being on time all the time. CN is focused on running a predictable, reliable, and safe network, and is partnered with IBM to ensure that the latest in AI technology is deployed in their network to ensure maximum safety and fluidity. With CN, our IBM teams are developing a first-of-its-kind, edge-based analytics platform which will detect railcar defects at 7 portals or mini-tunnels set up in the CN rail network. All this is done while the trains are moving at speed through the portals. Within minutes of the train passing, the IBM algorithms analyze and alert the CN operations centers to serious railcar defects that will require the immediate attention of their mechanical engineering team. These alerts are then sent to the next CN rail yard in order for the railcar to be properly inspected and repaired. With this technology, CN will be able to better target their rail yard inspections, increase safety, and boost the overall velocity of their industry-leading rail-centric supply chain.
Hey, Bill, I want to stop here. Can you hear me okay? Did that come through all right?
You sound great.
Okay, good. Okay, so now and that was a good presentation because that was actually a use case where we took our same compute hardware that we used in the supercomputer, applied AI algorithms to it, and and deployed it for the Canadian Railroad. And it's again, it's all visual and AI based. So now for a minute, let's focus on what I call computer vision. In 2011, the computer algorithms could solve an image recognition with about 25% of the time, with a 25% error rate, I'm sorry. Or put it a different way, they got it right about 3 out of 4 times. This was back in 2011, at that level of machine learning. Humans generally, and this could be argued, but generally have approximately a 5% error rate. And you can argue that, but that's approximately what we have calculated and measured. Now, if you look at 2016, this is at the 2016 point in time, deep learning, machine learning, had the ability of having only what I call 3% error rate. And even since 2016 to now, it's been consistently improving.
To the untrained eye, a bridge appears to be permanent, strong, stable, and it's not really moving. But this is an illusion. If it hasn't been inspected in the right manner and maintained in the same manner, a very sad accident can happen.
Maximo is a management system where we not only can write out work orders, but we see it as basically the foundation, the spine of everything we want to do from a digitization point of view.
The dream is that this technology can really help to reduce or maybe completely remove the risk of tragedies. Collapse of bridges, collapse of tunnels, collapse of buildings.
When we are having a bridge out in the sea, you have to be aware how the chloride is actually penetrating the concrete, because rust is one of the enemies for concrete structures. We literally have to hire mountaineers to climb the surfaces to actually do the inspections.
There are many disadvantages to traditional inspections. People's life is in danger sometimes.
Now we have changed that way of inspecting our concrete surfaces, from the mountaineer climbing around, using drones now.
Everything is done automatically. It's scalable. Scanning a bridge can take 1 day instead of taking a month.
All this data that feed into Maximo from sensor, from document, from images, and from other sources needs to be processed to extract knowledge, and that's where AI comes into play.
It's a huge stack of informal data.
unstructured data. And we need a machine that's able to read and process unstructured information.
Maximo can do it in a fast way, in a repeatable way, in a scalable way, and once it learns to do the job, it learns forever.
Now we have a way to show a complete picture of the health of a bridge. And it's not every second year or every 6 years we can do that assessment. We can do it from second to second.
So that was a good example of how this modern technology is helping to speed up and make more accurate analysis of something, a structure as big as that bridge. Think about it, that bridge is designed to last for 200 years at a minimum. And by applying these techniques and these tools, it makes it very much easier to actually take care of it. So now I want to get into some applied AI practices. So I don't know if you're familiar with enterprise design thinking, or if possibly need a little refresher course, but IBM created the loop to foster a constant flow of observing, reflecting, and making to find out our best way to find solutions to human problems. And this flow optimizes on possibilities and team alignment. However, if you observe and reflect without making, you're stuck in what we call analysis paralysis. If you make and reflect without observing, your team is flying blind. And Bill mentioned that I'm a pilot. I've been flying for 45 years. I'm instrument rated. And it's funny how these discussions actually hit home even in operation of an aircraft. Now, if you observe and make without reflection, which means you're just taking orders, you might as well just be making sandwiches. The heart of the enterprise design thinking is the reflection portion. It's how we constantly evaluate and reevaluate our team's thinking, and it's the birthplace of the restless reinvention as well as empathy. And that's the loop. Okay, so that's enterprise design thinking in a nutshell. So very often projects that fail are missing some key part of this loop. Successful projects have pieces and parts, people, planning, and placed together, or all three parts, which is, I might say, good design. And every journey starts by reflecting to converge on what you intend to do. After that, you can pretty much go in any order. You can observe, reflect, and make, or make, reflect, and observe. You got to find your team's momentum. What's important is that you do all three, and then you keep moving. Which brings me to a couple of definitions. Design, right? Design must solve for a specific problem and is evaluated for how effective it is at solving that problem. I mean, users just want it to work, whatever it is, right? They may or may not appreciate the design, but they always know if the solution truly solves their problem. Okay, artificial intelligence. There are many ways to define AI. The best and most straightforward definition is that AI are systems that can simulate human intelligence and thought processes. AI is often conflated with machine learning, but they are not interchangeable. Machine learning is the ability to learn from data rather than through explicit programming. So more generally, artificial intelligence is a set of systems that are taught to simulate human intelligence. Machine learning is a subset focused on learning with experience. And deep learning is a further specialization needing more data, more compute, and can self-learn. And clearly, these are all areas now that are advancing because of the hardware advances in computer architecture that has been coming along. So to put it all together, we have artificial intelligence plus design, which then gives us AI design. And AI design is the, is the purpose, plan, or intent behind simulating human thought processes. So why do we use artificial intelligence? I mean, you think about it, why is it becoming used these days? And AI is helping the human. Now, keep in mind that artificial intelligence is not to replace a human. I don't ever want to be replaced as a pilot. I like to fly airplanes. But this information that's coming to the user and pilot, in my case, it's all helps. So that's a good example is anti-brake systems in cars. Right? They was developed back in 1978. They're very commonplace now. But think about it. The human brain cannot react in a split second, especially when it's under stress. I mean, would you know to pump the brakes versus slamming on the brakes if you suddenly had something come up in front of you, or if you started sliding on ice? I mean, we all know conceptually that pumping the brakes is the right thing to do, but the brain, it doesn't work that way. Something comes up, you'll slam on the brakes. Anti-lock systems will actually do that pulsing for you, and it's a good example. Now, another one that's becoming more commonplace, of course, is collision avoidance and the ability to keep cars in track on the road. These are all systems that are assisting humans, not replacing, they're assisting us and making life much simpler. So if we go forward, there's a interesting piece of software that Michael pointed me to, and he suggests you go out and try this. It's called Canvas. And with your iPhone, you can scan a room in seconds. And I tried this with my office back on my ranch, and it was really interesting. So it basically scanned the room, and it sent it up to a computer system on the cloud. And in a couple of minutes, it sent back a very detailed rendering of my office, which was 99% accurate. And it was interesting. I thought I had 9-foot ceilings, and when I looked at the measurements it provided, it was a couple inches off. And sure enough, I went and measured it, and this was 100% accurate. And this company will provide 3D CAD models as well for cost, but you can get literally from your phone, scan a room, and get this information back basically in very little time. And this wasn't even possible a few years ago for a couple of reasons. One, this technology in your phone is brand new, and the cloud applications and software are also very brand new. So how do you get started? So let's talk about this. This is a complex space, and let me share something with you. So our colleagues at Google put together a great figure a few years ago that essentially shows all the different pieces and parts, going beyond just the AI model. Yeah, the machine learning, what we call the machine learning portion of it, is actually a very small part of a lot of number of systems that feed that little piece of code in the center. I mean, there's the infrastructure to serve the system, the data collection, all these other pieces. And not knowing about or planning or knowing how to measure all the effectiveness of each of these pieces could lead you to some pitfalls. I mean, you have to be very, very careful about knowing what data is coming into the system. And Michael had a pretty interesting example for me. This has to do with using Excel. Let me just show this to you really quickly. So we all use Excel, and there turns out there's some interesting characteristics of floating point numbers. If you look at the terminology, E, right? And floating point numbers are all defined under an IEEE standard 754, which has some interesting little side products to it. And he took me through this example, and I wanted to share this with you. So if you have a spreadsheet and you go and type in B1, the number I show you there, 0, 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the second one, you have 1.0. Well, if you add these two together, the floating point numbers will be truncated. And it's perfectly illegal according to IEEE 754. But what's interesting then, if you take that result and then you add them back together, it gives you another interesting little side effect, which is these rounding numbers off to the right. If you compare them, the machine will come back and tell you they're true. And if you subtract them, well, they end up being all zero. But the point is you have to be very careful and understand the data you're using. And if it could lead to very interesting results. Because all these answers are correct based on the IEEE 754 standard, but there are weird things that happen when you have very, very small numbers being worked into very large numbers. So now let's move to, some more modern. So let's talk about the MRI. I mean, Bill and I discussed this sort of thing. So back in the 70s, the first MRI imaging was done by machines that weighed tons, right? Very specialized facilities. In 2020, bedside MRI was approved by the FDA. And who knows, 2040, there may be something in the mall you can walk to and get an MRI, just basically, for 2 minutes to get your own MRI. Now, the question now comes to analyzing the data that comes from the MRI. And AI comes into its own for this sort of things. We can't replace the doctor, and I think that's an important statement. AI will help guide the doctor by providing initial analysis of the MRI and then providing ideas about where the problems could be. Again, this applies to flying an airplane. I've been, again, in the 45 years that I've been flying, the level of technology in the cockpit has improved immensely, and it's really been helping safety, really, because the information that's provided to me as a pilot in a more condensed mode allows for much safer operation of the aircraft, and artificial intelligence will provide more accurate information to the doctor. So let's take a moment to talk about the AI ecosystem. Backing out a little bit. For the most part, when people talk about AI, it's framed solely on the machine itself or the representative technology. That small box I highlighted in the chart from a few moments ago was that little piece. Now, in reality, to be able to do its job properly, the machine needs to be considered with an ecosystem, within an ecosystem, which has the world, which is represented by the data we have access to, and the policies of that data, that bind it. The business is represented by the organization's needs. The human is represented by their unique needs and the problems they need to solve. Right. More importantly, it's really the context between these four elements that provide the heart and soul of your AI capabilities. Without this context, your AI is an empty vessel that really doesn't serve any genuine purpose. Okay. So the framework is a set of activities, tools, principles that enables teams to design thoughtful, human-centered artificial intelligence solutions using enterprise design thinking. The AI Essentials Framework is a specific grouping of activities to work through these to align your team on strategy for an AI experience. And there are 5 local areas in this framework. The intent is align on the business and the user's intent for your solution. Data, just document the data and use it to make your idea a reality. Understanding, determining what you need to teach your AI. And reasoning, bring your ideas down to earth. and knowledge, which is a brainstorming the direct and indirect effects of your AI. So insights and some takeaways. We showed you some examples of real-world applications that IBM has been working on. Gave you some views or thoughts of how we think, or I think this is going into the future. I think it's really at its infancy at this point, and I really do encourage that that we start to get some partnerships going to see how we can better utilize this both in architecture and healthcare. And again, another shout out for my friend Mike Hollinger. I didn't really delve into it, but Michael, he is a distinguished engineer at IBM, which is at his age is quite an honor. But he wanted me to leave this with you. There are the toolkit, an AI toolkit that you can all go and use. It's free, and he recommends that you all go out and log in here, take a look, try it out. Let's get this conversation going. In a couple weeks, once Mike is off his maternity leave, would like to get together up at College Station, and we can continue our discussion on AI. Okay, Bill. Any questions?
There. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Great. I guess my thinking was that AI is something that's going to happen. It's good to know that it's all around us already, and that it's going to probably drag some of us kicking and screaming into the future, I think. But I'm excited about it, particularly the Moore's Law and what I see as a pattern of the digitizing of healthcare, and will make us even more subject to Moore's Law as the capacity increases exponentially. Hopefully, it will drive down the cost, because I think that's the other part of Moore's Law, is that the cost goes down proportionately too.
Absolutely, absolutely, it does
go up. So maybe there's a hidden thread there of good news in terms of cost of healthcare as it gets digitized. Looks like we do have some people in chat.
Oh, I saw the HIPAA rules. That's a very interesting and delicate topic. Let me see if I can bring up the chats. We can start where you want, but I just want to say one thing about the HIPAA confidentiality. in IBM, we literally take multiple courses every year to make sure we all understand those rules, especially in Europe, but HIPAA around the world in the US. You have to be very careful. I agree. This is confidential data, client data, patient data, which is follows very, very strict rules. It may limit, by the way, some of what would be out in the general public versus what would just be only available to a medical professional, a doctor, for example.
Does in that light, I guess the patient still owns the data? Can they?
Yes, patient owns the data. It's his data, and we have to provide methods for him to eliminate, to erase his data. It's very tricky. You have to keep track of it. It's when it's collected, it's his. Sorry, Bill, you're going to mention something.
No, I think that just seeming that if I own the data, I should be able to do something with it. And I don't know, at some point it probably fails to be identified with an individual, and just becomes identified with a whole community. Whatever.
Correct, but it does provide some interesting challenges. Michael had that presentation of all the, the data coming into the system and the AI computers. Well, that's, you have, for client data like this, it has to be very carefully managed and identified with that patient. And as I said, the patient has the right to manage who can look at that data. So it's a very tricky aspect of all this. It's not a free-for-all.
No, that's for sure. Yeah, we have a way of case here. Any?
Kevin, this is Ray.
Ray, yeah.
I've just got a question sort of on a peripheral issue, Kevin. First, thank you very, very, very much for the presentation. The examples really did make your message come alive. I thought that was put together nicely. My question is about the hard side of this, the technology, which I understand is primarily where you live.
Correct.
And my question is, I keep hearing about the challenge of processing large data sets, which the deep learning is sort of dependent on, and that these ginormous data sets, even among the fastest of computers, could theoretically be looking at years and years, if not even longer periods of time, to do thorough analysis, which has brought to everyone's tip of the tongue quantum computing. Tell us what that really means, and where are we in getting to the promises of quantum computing and super speed processing?
So let me answer it a couple of different ways. First, let me go after the first problem, which is these enormous data sets. And I'll put a little plug in for the computers that I'm involved in designing. But we've been designing, and again, how do you tackle all these large data sets? And our computers are designed with very, very large memory footprints. They're not cheap, but they have 4 to 16 terabytes of memory, so you can actually get all the data into memory, and then hundreds of processors at high speed with high-speed interconnects to crunch on that data. So from what I call the hard computer side, what I call not quantum, but the classic computer, that's how we've been tackling that problem. And from generation to generation, we are greatly improving the bandwidth just to be able to feed these processors. First of all, get this data set into memory, fast memory, and then a lot of processors to work on that data. And then, as I mentioned, the introduction to the GPUs, that supercomputer that I showed you earlier, we used a special thing called the NVLink that connected between the NVIDIA GPU and our processors. It was a custom high-speed highway to feed data for this exact same reason, feeding data back and forth to the GPU for the data crunching. That's classic. That's the classic approach. I didn't answer your question about taking years. Well, we're bringing it down slowly, but through faster and faster hardware. Quantum computing is a different animal altogether. And I will tell you, I've been up to the IBM site to get to see where we have our current quantum computer engineering going on. It's still at its infancy. I put quantum computer as in a position right now where it's still a little child learning how to deal with the world. And as you know, or may not know, quantum computing is difficult because it has to run at very low temperatures, and because of the high error rates of the quantum bits, and they don't always create the same answers every time. And so quantum computers have to do, essentially run the same brain test multiple times to get to what they think is the correct answer. So I guess where I'm going with it is I don't think it's there yet from an AI perspective. It will be probably well past my lifetime, but it's in very, very early stages. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I lose you? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. No, that answered my question. We've got a team here at A&M whose mission is do quantum computing.
Yep.
I mean,
Fascinating. It's fascinating.
I can't communicate with them on that sort of stuff. I mean, they're on a different planet, but it's fascinating that they, in their mind's eye, it is something to grasp one day or to work toward grasping one day. And, you know, they're full speed, all out to the wall. Let's go make this happen. And there seems to be consensus that it's not here yet. There seems to be consensus that it will be one day. And that in the meantime, these gigantic data sets will continue to be a bit of a challenge to fully harvest the truth that they may contain.
Yep, correct. And again, we're making use more and more of the multi-processing and parallel processing, which obviously that frontier, that supercomputer I showed you, that's a parallel processor, right? Every one of those new nodes are all interconnected, hundreds of them, right? And just look at how that growth, I mean, if you go out and look at the top 500 and you look at how every year there's a new one, and it's always a big game with us, right? We're always trying to be the best. And that again, parallel processing. And what does that drive? That drives brand new software models and new tools and methodologies for how does the human brain consume this data? How does the machine consume this data? And I'm seeing, and again, that's why I want to get Michael up there. We can talk more about this with him, but there's more and more of these software tools coming online to help grasp all this data. How do you massage it and consume it and make sense out of it, right? And you just think about what we have now in your car. Your car is consuming all this data today. Well, at least I drove old cars, but even my new car now, which has LiDAR, it has visual I mean, it's visually watching the road in front of me. Just think of all the data it's consuming. I happen to know for a fact, because I know friends working on those processors, they have supercomputers. There's built into those cars. And all that data comes into them from those sensors and are real-time calculated by those essentially supercomputers in our cars. Right? And that's now. I mean, I've been working, I have some friends working with the Tesla designs that are coming down the road 5 years down the road. I mean, I'm a little nervous about self-driving cars. I'll go on record. But think about just the ability for a car like that to help you drive. It doesn't have to do the driving, but just the information it gives you. And it's the same in the industry today, in the medical industry. Just MRIs, how much data is in there? I mean, how much information do we miss, the doctor miss, just because it's in there, it's a little fuzzy, but AI can bring it out, at least show it to them, right? The doctor, again, we're not going to replace the doctor, but we can provide guidance to the doctor, right? And that's where I see a lot of this going. I'll always keep saying, I don't want to replace a human. I want to go on record. I don't want to replace humans. I want to fly my own airplanes and drive my own cars, but I appreciate all the information this new technology provides to us.
You'll have to have the architect design it. So I don't think we're going away.
Nope.
Sounds like I think we're going to get a lot of help and maybe even do some more fantastic things. Carlos, you had commented on a question. Best way to introduce AI into the firm, I presume.
I have a recommendation, Bill.
You do? Good. What's the recommendation?
So Mike Hollinger, as I said, he's given the authority. He can actually come up there. We can start. I would say let's get some dialogue going between IBM and A&M. Let's get, and I think maybe we can plan something in a couple weeks where he can come up, talk more in depth about AI, what's available from IBM, where his view of everything, where everything is going. And maybe start there, Bill. I mean, I think we gotta get this dialogue started. I think it's
right.
The most
So
important.
maybe we can have a Center for Health Systems and Design and an IBM symposium on artificial intelligence. in the future. I think that's exciting. Is it going to be moving to the firm level anytime real soon? Or is it already there and we just call it by something else?
To the what level?
To the firm, the individual practitioner, the architect on the boards, unquote.
I ultimately think that's where it's heading, because where you can actually consolidate it and give it back to the doctor in his office. I guess maybe I don't know if I'm answering the right question, but the data should be real time available to the local physician in his office.
Yeah, I'm curious. You know, the tonal system that's out there now. It's an exercise and monitoring kind of system. Looks like it applies to a wall connected to the internet. That yesterday the FDA approved what looks like a watch as a heart monitoring device. So it seems like we're the idea of healthcare islands is going to be is if there's internet, that connection actually gets made everywhere.
It does, and now we go back to the HIPAA rules. This becomes tricky for everybody because you have a heart monitor. Well, again, that data is yours. It's being provided up to the cloud. Let's say it's an Apple Watch. They have to follow the laws for client privilege and privacy. That's where things are getting very tricky because they have to adhere to these laws, and we have to be sure that the client information is private, unless they don't. I mean, it's up to them. It's up to the patient, right? They own the data.
So do we get the lawyers involved in the discussion, or do we have the discussion and then tell them what to do?
No, we're driven by lawyers, Bill.
Yeah. I keep a different answer.
Lawyers. I spend a lot of time with lawyers, even in my current job at IBM. I mean, I spend a lot of time with lawyers. They tell us what to do. I mean, let's be honest. The penalty of breaking, even accidentally breaking those laws is pretty severe. So I can tell you at IBM, we're really, really, really careful about this.
Well, yeah, you have to be in this day and age. So Ben is commenting that symposium is it's even a great idea, which is that's good. I agree with that.
Yeah, Kevin, I think that your lecture just really enlightening and open, my eyes in also, you haven't mentioned the health, the medical spaces and, from the design architectural design standpoint, maybe we can discuss that in the future when Kevin and you and Mike coming to A&M, we initiate that kind of dialogue would be helpful in the future.
Right.
Thanks. I need to go back to Autumn. She had actually a really good question about.
Oh, I like her question. Okay, what are the environmental impacts of these larger processors, and how will IBM mitigate the environmental risks? Oh, that's a good question, Autumn. Well, I can tell you by reducing the size of the processors, the amount of compute power or energy input is improving. But you're right; these systems do consume a lot of electricity. That is very true. And I mean, from a technology, from a computer architecture perspective, what we've been working really hard at is actually putting features into these processors for power management to actually allow us to get the power down on these. So the amount of compute per power has been improving immensely over the generations. That's how I, as a computer engineer, is trying to help that problem. You're right. I won't dispute it. It's a big problem. I mean, just the data centers today, the Google centers, Facebook. I've been in these centers. I know what they look like and how much power they consume. And we're working really hard on the computer side to make our processors more efficient through lots of new advanced power management techniques. That's not helping the environment, though. I have to tell you, I'll go on record. I didn't answer your question on the environmental risk part.
No, I appreciate it, and you know, really have enjoyed your presentation. You know, the whole AI piece, you know, and what that means for creativity, and how, you know, architecture and design, you know, there is a emphasis a lot on creativity. Engineering side, you know, not necessarily always the case, you know, and how do we push our engineers, you know, to be more creative? I know Texas A&M has a multidisciplinary, you know, where they're combining degrees, where they're bringing people together, you know, interdisciplinary engineering and public health, the engineering medicine program, you know, these kinds of things. You know, what you talk about, what you've mentioned on Moore's Law, I go to my third and fourth year students and I ask them if they know who, you know about Moore's Law and who that is, and, you know, deer in the headlight. There's an author, I'm not sure if you've read him, Simon Winchester, and he has a book that I've really enjoyed, The Perfectionists, How Precision Engineers Created the Modern World. But the things that you're talking about getting smaller and smaller and smaller, I mean, it is just absolutely fascinating. So thank you for today.
Sure.
And yeah, I don't know the answer to the environment, but was just kind of curious on what steps IBM is taking. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it points to the, you know, we had the challenge last semester about and the white papers that were done. One is on being carbon neutral, maybe even carbon positive in healthcare, and, you know, the challenges of healthcare. And then you throw in an even greater, even growing dependency on the digital world and the challenges that they bring into the system with them. This is a big subject area, I think.
It's a difficult problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I've seen these computers. You've seen pictures of my office, Bill, of computers from the size of a room down to the size of what's in your iPhone today.
Yeah.
It's, who knows where things will be in 20 years. I do know that we're going to 3D technology. You may, from a computer architecture perspective, Moore's Law has hit a certain boundary, and if, you know, reducing chip size. And we're going three-dimensional now. It won't be long, well, long, maybe 10, 15 years, you'll see literally cubes. There'll be a cube, stacked chips. I mean, we're already doing it in some of our current technology where we stack 2 chips, for example, but over time,
wow,
will be a compute density, and then Autumn, you mentioned about power, and then we got the power problem inside a cube. You know, you have the power density in there, and how you get power into it and heat out of it. It's a continual challenge of electricity in and heat out. That's what we live with.
And you'll have to do like the jet engine turbines, and you'll have to have you know, holes, you know, at every place.
There's all sorts of discussion of having little water tubes that run through it and to extract the heat. For me personally, it's cool technology, and I've been blessed by the fact that I've been in the industry for 40 years, so I've been able to see it grow from you know, through this stage. And I always tell my new engineers that although I've seen it through the last 40 years, the next 40 years will be just as fascinating and very different. I can't even predict what it'll be in 40 years. It'll be smaller, it'll be different, but this technology, we never slow down. I mean, we find a challenge, it gets, okay, we can't make a chip any more dense, well, then we go vertical, and then there's new architectures coming on. We talked about quantum computers, that's in its infancy, you know, and in 20 years, just think what a quantum computer would be capable of.
Yeah.
And Ray, that's assuming they can teach a guy like me how it works.
I've been reminded that we always grossly overestimate how much we can accomplish in the next 5 years and totally miss how much we really are going to accomplish in 10 years. You know, so 10 years of those is probably about as far out as I think we're going to be able to look. I'm not sure we're going to be able to look out 5 years.
It'll be different in 5 years, right? I mean, think about it. 5 years ago, you know, the iPhone, and what is its capabilities, just that alone. And the internet interconnectivity, right? Because it's really, the computer is part of it, but then you have the interconnect. And what we have, the infrastructure in the United States, the internet and the capabilities in 5G and what that's bringing, and the constant data flow, and that's just improving and leaps. That's still following Moore's law and its capability, right?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to blow the whistle here. It's 12:30. You have a hard stop at 12:30, so we need to honor and respect that. Let you get on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your day. Thank you very, very much. Met every expectation I had for it. I hope everybody got a lot out of it. I think it's just the beginning of a long and beneficial dialogue for everyone.
Yep.
So thank you all, everybody that attended it for HIAC. We thank your firms for allowing them to belong to our organization, and we look forward to next year already. Thank you.